And so in religious traditions, there's a lot of lore and emphasis and stories about generosity, also in the Buddhist tradition. And it's often the common understanding of it as kind of a materialistic understanding, that you're giving things, you're giving material things or money. And that's the sort of exemplar of generosity. It's also often considered quite individualistic. So there's a sense that it's I doing something, I being generous, I having this motive to be generous and expressing it in this way. I'm going to give something to someone else. So there's a three-part triangle there: the giver, the receiver, and the gift. And it often plays into a kind of a scarcity mindset. So we have a mindset of, well, I don't really have enough to give anybody anything, or if I give someone money, then that's less money for me. So there's a kind of scarcity mentality that can play into it, which is a little bit possessive and a little bit fear-based. How much can I afford to give before I'm going to be strapped myself, you know? And so there's some anxiety around it, and people are often avoidant. So if you watch the people going in and out of the supermarket, where there are people from other countries who are here as refugees, who are asking for money, you know, you see how they sort of hurry past or try and avoid looking them in the eye, right? So this is pretty common sense of what it means to be generous, and our sort of defenses against that open-hearted quality of generosity. In the Buddha's teachings, so I consider that kind of an immature view, but it's a commonly held view. So in the Buddhist teachings, there's the concept of worldly giving, that is, giving material things, giving even time and attention in a worldly sense, you know, and then there's an understanding of another aspect of giving, another type of giving, which is really a giving that is based on emptiness. So there isn't really any self doing it. There isn't really any substance to the gift, and there isn't really any receiver who's separate from me. And this is a very challenging concept, but this sense of there's no part of existence that's separate from me, that's separate from this, whatever it is. However, the teachings don't really make a distinction in terms of what's honorable or what's valuable. To give someone in need material things is not less valuable than giving some Dharma teachings, for example, that will illuminate them or enlighten them in some way. And there's a one, you know, sort of more, I think, valued form of giving, which is to give fearlessness. And so I've been really taken by this. Like, that is one of the things that we can give others that is so precious, because most of us live in fear or have, you know, this environment of fear that we're in, that we're constantly, you know, trying to, you know, struggle against. And so to give fearlessness is really, in some ways, like the highest form of giving. But all forms of giving are valued. Even people giving in a grudging way, still valued in Buddhist teachings. It's the mind of care, and that mind of care opens the heart. So what does that mean? It sort of, it's the kind of antidote to what I think of as non-giving giving, where you give with some expectation, any expectation. So we'll be grateful that they will reciprocate, that there's some kind of exchange or transaction involved, or that they'll approve of us, or that other people will think that we're, you know, generous people because they can see us giving, or that we can, you know, somehow inspire others to do the same. Or, you know, this is a kind of conditional giving. It depends on conditions, and there are expectations that are associated with it. And the expectations are varied depending, you know. So it's it's very transactional, I would say, because there's an expectation of something in return, anything, a happy face or whatever. So we all know about the classic examples of giving money, giving food, giving clothing, and that's the worldly kind of giving. Even giving Dharma teachings is a form of worldly giving if it comes from a sense of, I bestow these teachings on you, poor thing, who lack them, right? If it comes from a sense of lack in the other person or the other party, then it's not truly coming from that Buddha heart and mind, which sees there isn't any distinction, there isn't any giver, receiver, or gift. It's right in our meal chant. Giver, receiver, and gift are empty, right? So there's this heart-opening quality. And I think we can all think of some examples that are not material things to give or money to give. What do you think? What are some things that you have given or been given that have nothing to do with the material world?
Time.
Time, yep.
Attention.
Attention is huge, yeah.
Listening, really
Listening.
listening to somebody.
Really listening.
Yes.
Kindness,
Encouragement.
encouragement,
Company.
company, yeah.
Assistance with a problem, like
Yeah.
joining in to get someone's car out of the snow.
Uh-huh, that's right. So some cooperative effort. Yeah. And so we've all experienced these. We've all given these gifts, right? And we've experienced them as gifts, I think. How much it means to have somebody truly pay attention to you without like their eyes flicking over to their phone. Or truly listen to you without their eyes rolling back in their head thinking, what am I going to get for lunch? Like there's a way in which we feel felt and we feel seen and we feel heard deeply. And we can all recall those times, right? Where that meant so much to us. So.
I think another one is without judgment.
Without judgment, yeah. Yeah, sometimes our generosity is bound up with, is this person worthy or not worthy? Is this, what are they worthy of? And so that's another thing where there's a kind of judgment that isn't discerning, like this person needs some food or clothing or whatever. It's more like, a judgment, a sense of one up and one down, right? So this is a very important quality, and that's why it's the first of the paramitas, because all of the other paramitas flow from this one. Our patience flows from a certain kind of generosity, right? Our morality flows from a certain kind of generosity. Our vigor flows from a certain kind of generosity we bring to a situation, right? Our concentration, our ability to focus comes from that same place of generosity, and our wisdom certainly comes from that same place of generosity. So I asked Joan if she would join me to talk about this, and there's a reason for that. Joan is perhaps the most generous heart I've ever met in my entire life.
Oh my goodness.
She's the kind of generosity that doesn't respond to need, but anticipates need and provides what's needed before even the person may know themselves, as she has done for me. And she's not bound up in ideas of makes me a good person, or other people will see how generous I am and this will make me improve my standing, in this community. She's the one who got right away what Appamada was about from the beginning. At the very first intensive, Joan was there. She's written about it, it's in the book. She saw that she was at the birth of something important. And the gift of her story of that for the book is really monumental. So one of the things I realized in my long association with you is that generosity is your natural state. It's not something you try to do or try to be, right? So, well, this is what I've observed anyway, and maybe others have also observed this with Joan in her many, many ways of participating in the community, on the board, and so many ways, right? So many offerings. So I want to recognize that, but I also have some questions about that, You've given great care to the teachers. You're always thinking about the ways that you can provide something that the summer needs. And it's so profound and powerful for me. So I wonder if you would first just say a little reflection about your understanding of generosity in the sense of the paramita.
Well, first I have to respond to those incredible things that Peg said about me, and to say that it is my karma that did this. Things that have happened in the past have made me respond the way I do. It's not anything, it's just the way it is. So you're asking how I see generosity? Well, I personally first come to generosity through gratitude. And I am gifted by experiencing so much gratitude. I just see beautiful things all over, and that makes me want to be generous. That makes me want to support the people, the things, the events that are creating this gratitude that I feel. And then another thing is need. And I see the web of life, and it comes from my biology background. Tell me if I go on too long.
Hold on just a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Stephanie to hold up the striker when it's 8:15 and again when it's 8:20. Okay?
And what time is it now?
9:45.
Okay. And in biology lab, we had this petri dish that had nutrients in it, and we were growing bacteria, and there were places where the bacteria was just growing up just unbelievably, and that's where there were lots of nutrients. And then there was just very few bacteria, and it was where there were few nutrients. Well, it wasn't that those big healthy nutrients were any better, bacteria were any better than the other struggling ones. It was the nutrients.
It was the conditions.
Yes. And so with the web of life, some of the strands are strong and full of wonderful, soft things, and then some are threadbare, and they tend to break. And so that's where the need is. And so
what you do is you go around in your life observing and picking up those observations that show where something is needed, right?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful explanation of it, really. And I'm wondering, I have a lot of questions about this, so I'm wondering, where did this originate for you? Were you born with this heart of generosity when you came into the world? Were you taught by your parents? Did you discover this on your own somehow?
I would say yes. I do think I have something in me that recognizes beauty and love and celebrates that. But I have a wonderful family of origin that gave me lots of support.
But did they teach you explicitly about generosity?
Yes.
So
They
how did they do that?
Well, they were very generous to the church.
So they were modeling.
Yes, they
Uh-huh.
did. And they were generous to me. That's more modeling.
So more modeling, you got that experience, and you got the experience of feeling what that felt
Yeah,
like.
I think it was modeling. That's
Yeah.
what they did.
So they didn't teach you explicitly,
Well-
you need to be generous in these ways, or,
Well, they probably did. Probably part of my allowance should go to the church, probably, you know, and to help others.
so that's
in need.
direct teaching.
And, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's just interesting to me how this particular part of me gets fostered, right? And lots of us didn't grow up in those similar kinds of circumstances, I can assure you. I grew up in a household that was filled with the mind of scarcity and the constant kind of anguish of my mother that we were going to lose our house, you know, alternating with going to Las Vegas. So, and the sense that there's not enough, there's just not enough. They weren't really churched, they didn't really make contributions or donations that I know of. So it was a very different, like the Petri dish, different environment, right? In which, you know, you're constantly worried about not having enough money. I don't know if anybody else had that kind of upbringing. Yeah, it marks you, you know, and it's in your bones, right? In your bones, you have a sense that you're not gonna make it. You know, you're just not gonna make it. You're not gonna have enough, and, you know, somehow you're not gonna make it. So that mind narrows you, and you have a tremendous amount of creativity in the ways that you are generous. And when you're coming from the mind of scarcity, you don't have that creativity. Even if you think you're going to give something, it's out of this little narrow idea, right? It's not looking at the field of what's thriving, what's not thriving, where's the need, you know, the way that you do. So it's very different, right? And so this is, it's interesting to me because you're talking about the causes and conditions, right? We're trying to create causes and conditions in which this quality can thrive, not only within ourselves, but within our society, right? Because a society in which this is one of the qualities is a society we want to live in, right? And so part of what you're doing is, for us, modeling, some direct teaching, just what you're talking about right now, and thinking about the Petri dishes, you know, like, oh, if we want this saga to thrive, we have to provide the conditions for that, right? We have to do that together. If we want our families to thrive, you know, and so it's really difficult if you've been raised with the mind of scarcity, it's hard not to pass that on to your children, you know, because it's so imprinted, so deeply imprinted, right? Other people who have had this experience. It's like hard to give your kids that open-hearted generosity because you yourself are fearful. How am I gonna provide for this kid, right? So, have there been people in your lives besides your parents who really inspired you with their generosity?
Well, David does, my
Yes.
husband.
Yes, he is the heart of generosity,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah,
He's very generous.
yeah, yeah. And we probably have people in our lives that we think of or recognize as extremely generous, and that where it's kind of natural. It's not like they're thinking, how can I be generous? It's just this natural offering. I don't know how to describe, I can give you a tiny example from when I was in graduate school, and I had a wonderful graduate school advisor, Charles Cooper. And he was so warm and so humane and so brilliant. One day I saw him standing outside of his office, and he was just sort of basking in the sun. We're in San Diego. Sort of basking in the sun, enjoying himself. And I came up to him and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And he said, "Come to my office at 2:00. Is that a no? And I realized something really important in that little interaction. He was taking very good care of himself and protecting his own enjoyment of the moment, but he was making me feel extremely special rather than rejected. I was going to come to his office and ask him a question, you know? That made me important enough not to just give a drive-by response, right? So it's in these tiny moments sometimes that you experience this generosity that is unfamiliar to the ways that we have of being, right? It's something new to us. I never knew that somebody could turn you down and make you feel honored. You know, that wasn't my first experience of that. So this is what's so interesting to me is, okay, the other thing that occurred to me is, have you ever made mistakes in a generous gesture or effort?
It's hard to know. Perhaps. David and I were eating at Central Market, and there was a man, David was sitting here, I was sitting here, there was a man there. And he was sitting with his eyes closed, and his face got very bright, and then he'd go like this, anyway, and I don't know, I knew something was, that he was probably homeless, he had a drink in front of him that he wasn't, and I thought he was trying to get warm. And so anyway, I was looking at him the whole meal. And so when it was over, I said, would you like something to eat? How about a hamburger? He said, whatever, I'll take whatever you give me. I said, well, let's get what you want. So I got a menu and showed it to him, and he came up with something, I don't remember what it was, but it was not at all what I would have expected. It was not a hamburger. And so I went to get it, and David said, why don't you just give him money? And there's a reason, because to get food, you had to have a phone at Central Market. And so David was thinking, I would have to stay there and get the food, and we needed to move on. And I was thinking I could figure it another way. But anyway, I look at my billfold, and all I have is the 20. And so I gave him the 20. And and I thought, oh, he's seeing much more possibility than food. And I thought, I think this was a mistake.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know what he did with that, but.
Yeah. Normally, we only know something's a mistake by the consequences. So sometimes we have naive generosity where we're giving money to someone who's going to use it to harm themselves in some way, right? It's a naive kind of generosity. And so it's always our practice to pay attention, what is it that's going to help the petri dish thrive, right? And what is not going to poison it? So there are times when our generosity has to take a different form than giving someone something. It may be redirecting them somewhere where they can actually get help, or maybe, there are lots of other possibilities for what is actually going to help them thrive. So I think this is part of what permeates the paramitas from the back end is wisdom, right? We're learning to be wise in this offering that comes from an open heart, and that comes from a sense of non-separation. That there's a kind of emptiness to our notions of being a separate self. It doesn't really hold up when we think about it. When we think about the generosity we've been the recipients of, we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be breathing, we wouldn't be on this planet, we wouldn't have a healthy body, none of these things. Not very long ago, you were at death's door. You were completely wiped out by very serious terminal illness. Yeah.
8 years ago.
8 years ago. And look at you now. Life is generous. Yeah, and many people came forward, brought meals,
Many people were so generous.
Yeah.
The Sangha was so generous.
Yeah, so that's part of the feeding of the gratitude, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
When we are in need, when we are receivers, not, the benefactors, but when we're the receivers, and that is a way of giving also, because we give others the opportunity to express their generosity, right? So you were on the receiving end after so much generosity that you bestowed on others, that it's a different feeling, but you actually were giving those folks an opportunity to show how much they care for you. And when we're all self-reliant, as we tend to believe is so virtuous here in this country, and we are depriving others of the opportunity to express their generosity and to experience that, right? So that's sort of the flip side, isn't it?
Well, and I did that one time with Apamata, and I still regret it to this day. Joel offered to come visit. And I thought, Joel works all the time, you know. He shouldn't be spending his free time. And so I didn't accept that. You know, and that was, I think, it was definitely a loss for me. And I didn't allow Joel to give what he was offering. Because I decided it was too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a good example of this is my sister, who loves to get Thai massage. So her daughter connected her with a Thai masseuse, who was really, really gifted, you know. And so, and at the same time, the Thai masseuse was telling my sister's daughter how arduous it is to do Thai massage, you know. It's really demanding, it's really, you know. So my sister goes for a Thai massage, she comes back and she says to her daughter, well, it wasn't really that much, you know. I didn't, I didn't ask her for much because I know how hard it is for her. And so then the Thai masseuse says to my sister, I didn't really do very much because it seemed like she didn't really want very much Thai massage, but Thai massage is what I do. I mean, it's what I love. And I really wanted to give her a true Thai massage, but it seemed like that wasn't what she wanted. And I mean, this was, two very generous people totally misunderstanding each other, you know? So we, we're constantly learning what it means to be that open-hearted Buddha generosity. Right? So we want to allow a little time for your questions, and also we're going to give you homework. But I thought if you have questions for Joan, or you have questions for me around this topic, or things that you're reflecting on and want to share with others, I know Dan is going to have to leave at this time every day, right, for his job. Yeah. And Jess too, right?
I'm gonna try to stay as long as I can. Maybe 15, yeah.
Yeah,
And
Anne too.
yeah. So apologies for the fact that we run over your time when you have to leave. But are there questions from folks in yeah, Anne?
Yeah, you talked about using your wisdom and discernment when you say, I'm gonna give someone something, or I'm gonna not give this but something else. And I was struck as Joan was talking about the situation with Joel and how often I do that. And that I use my discernment, what I think of as my discernment, and I make a decision to say, no, I'm taking care of you, or no, I'm not gonna do that because something else. And how important it is for me to keep in mind, I don't know the whole story.
Yeah.
I don't know the whole story. I have my idea about what's gonna work here and what I think is wise, but
And we forget the mutuality of it. Like, you could have said to Joel, would that be an inconvenience for you? Because I don't want to inconvenience you if you're busy, right?
Yeah.
So there's a mutuality that's involved in this but we feel like, we don't check with each other. Is this something that would feel good for you? Or is it, would this, would this be satisfying in some way? Yeah. Thank you. That's a really great reminder, to check in. The ways in which we defer people's generosity because we want to, not burden them somehow.
Yeah. Hi, Joan. I'm just so touched by this because the fact that you see her for that is so meaningful to me. But I have a question for you about generosity, because you are such a good model for me. I'm in this very complex family dynamic, and my aging mother, she's 100, and I give. and nobody in my family ever thanks me. And it's so hard because I thank them all the time. I go out of my way thinking I'll model it for them, right? And maybe they'll be grateful for all that I do, which is more of the emotional support of my mother. A lot of practical things happen around her, but she's really neat and emotional. So I guess my question is, how do you do it when you feel so underappreciated? And it's a complex situation.
You know, my heart goes out to you. It's so hard, and it seems to fall on one person. And there's not a good answer. Someone needs to do it. You're there. You're the one that somehow feels the needs of your mother. The others don't feel. I was in the same situation with my mother. My sisters are wonderful daughters. They didn't get it. And it's just not a good situation. It's just a hard one.
Thank you.
Anne feels your pain.
And it's the suffering isn't in the giving, the suffering is in the lack of any appreciation for that, right? So now we see that's where the suffering lies, is in the need for something coming back, right?
The lack of nourishment.
The lack
Yeah,
of
She
nourishment.
has given so much. You are nourishing so hard, and you're depleted.
And I think the larger lesson is, who are we not appreciating? Where are we not providing that thanks, that appreciation in our own lives, right?
Very deep teaching, thank you, yes.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so it's a reminder, we need to be aware of opportunities for showing our appreciation for the sort of, I think, taken for granted generosity of others, you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's wonderful.
We
Yeah.
have Michael and Rosemary.
Oh, okay. Let's do online folks and then we'll come back to you, Stephanie. Michael?
Thank you. So Joan, I had a question. When you mentioned the giving the $20 to this person that you thought might be homeless, and you were concerned about what that person would do with it. So when I first moved to Austin, I would give money to people on the corners as I drove by, because there were plenty of them at the stoplights. And at one point, I started worrying that they might use it for drugs or alcohol or something that was not good for them. And so I bought a bunch of Kind bars and started giving them out. And frequently people would say, well, I'm a diabetic and I don't want that, or whatever it is. Then I had the experience of meeting someone who used to be homeless. And we had a long conversation about this. And he said that what I ought to do is just keep a bunch of dollar bills in my ashtray and just give them to the people, and not use my judgment to interfere with the generosity that I felt about what was going on. And that was transformative for me. And that's what I do now.
Well, thank you, Michael, for telling us about that, because that's it's nice to hear some options.
Yeah. Rosemary?
Good morning, and thank you. This has been really very, very rich. I wanted to point out your professor sunning himself and that whole exchange, because his self-generosity was such a big aspect of his response to you. So he's actually modeling something really important, and at the same, I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And at the same time, not just responding positively, but like you said, acknowledging it and actually making you feel kind of important. Mary Beth, you know, I don't think this is going to be helpful, but one of the things that has helped me in just in my life in general is how often am I self-appreciating? And you have a really extreme situation there, so that's why I think it may be like a drop in the bucket, but just in general, I think that can be really, really something to remind ourselves about, just in general. There was something else, but it was that receiving taps into our vulnerability, and that can be painful and cause us to back away and push people away, maybe. So that was the other piece I think is kind of really important. Thank you.
Stephanie.
So I just, you actually have taught on this before at the Paramitas, and I was in that intensive. And I remember something you said about generosity that has always stuck with me, and that was what you called naive generosity. And you explained it in the sense that if you are so generous that you give away everything you have, are you thinking about who is going to take care of you? And what kind of burden that is going to impose on other people if they have to take it. And I just thought that was such a wise answer, because it really speaks to what I hope I have as a generous nature, but thinking about also how, without being in a scarcity mindset, how much can I give away or give away emotionally without causing harm to myself or others, so that I put them in a situation where it's not where they want to offer help, but they have to, because I have not been wise. So I really appreciated that, because it always stuck with me.
Yeah, and I think, we, much as we want to give other people opportunities to be generous to us, we also have to recognize that our bodhisattva vow is for all beings, not all beings minus one. So self-sacrifice is not an ideal in Buddhist teaching. It's just not. It's not a virtue, it's not saintly, it's not, anything to be admired. Rather, we give from a feeling of abundance, right? Give from that sense that the heart of generosity is boundless. What's not boundless is our time, our attention, our resources, and that's what we need to be good stewards of. But the heart of generosity itself is boundless, and that's what, it's exactly what my advisor was showing, right? I will make time for you, and I'm going to do it when it is an appropriate time for me. Yeah.
We have Kathy and myself when you're ready.
Okay, Jess, and then we'll do Kathy and
Okay, one is, I remember, I'll speak of Joan's generosity. I remember when I was, had my concussion, and I don't know why, I reached out to you, and I unloaded so much that was happening with me, and so much emotion and fear and stress and everything, and there was something of there must have been a trust or something to kind of be able to share that openly, and so, and you're very generous with continuing to talk with me, so that, I mentioned it before, but it's, we put it on the record. And then the other thing is, one thing that stuck with me, Peg, was at that same time, I'm a social worker and I kind of see myself as a caregiver. And I think there's also maybe a fear of being in the position I was, which is not really being able to caregive, but maybe more in a position to receive care, and that was uncomfortable. And so you said like, like in the chant, like no giver, no receiver, no gift, and he said it in a way that I could maybe take it in at that time, which was, we're both, we're caregivers and care receivers. And then that really hit me because I just remember so many times in my visits, I feel a nourishment, like just like with that Thai masseuse, like I feel that, and then I'm like, oh crap, like, oh wow, like this is, so even when I'm the care receiver, I'm also this, so there's just this less of a duality and,
And I felt that when you reached out to me, it was a gift to me too. I saw there was no difference between
I
so
think-
cut down the fear of it.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate people's capacity to say, I can't do that right now, and so we don't ask, we don't reach out, we don't connect with something that we hope for, we long for, because we anticipate that they're gonna be busy, they've got other things to do, this is not important to them or whatever. And so it's one of the things we can sort of foster in the Sangha is this idea that this is generosity that goes both ways. There's no giver, there's no recipient. And just as, I was talking about when you give your child a toy, you're the recipient of all their joy and happiness, and they're the recipient of, the happiness of whatever you've given them. And so who's really the giver? Who's really the receiver? And what's the gift actually? It's not the toy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we say it's empty, not because it's vacant. That's not what we mean when we say empty. We mean it's not a separate construct.
May I ask who is just speaking? Because we can only see Peg and Joan.
Oh,
That was Jess.
that was Jess.
Thank you. If people could say their name before they speak, that would be lovely.
Okay, all right. Kathy?
So I'm Kathy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know, my hearing isn't as good this morning. Before I came into Appamana, and probably that's why I found my path to come here. And I had been the care manager for my mother for a few years. And at one point, we had her come to our house because I realized that she couldn't be in her apartment and in San Antonio. So that affected my daughters who were teenagers and getting ready to do some very big things, and my relationship with my husband. And it was absolutely draining. And I'm so glad that I was able to find Appamana. One of the things I know today is that I don't have to do it alone. I was an only child, so I felt responsibility. And I also, my life has been in the helping professions. And I think it's more difficult for people that go into those professions to not do. So today I know that I can ask others and that I don't have to do it alone. And I have Zen meditation. And being with Zen has just opened up my world. I'll say that too. When I said yesterday, take the backward step, the person that has given that to me so often is Marian Healy, who is the first female Roshi in Ireland. And I have the gift of going there almost every year for the last 6 or 7 years to be with that woman and be with Peg. It's just, it's such a gift. And each time I'm with these teachers, that is their generosity gift to me.
I just wanted to say that it's 19 minutes past, and 20 minutes past is the service time.
It's
Am I
quarter, right now?
No, it's 19.
Oh, 19 after, okay, so we have 1 minute. It's a lightning round. No, it's just a time check?
I thought Jim wanted to say something.
I wanted to say something, but we're out of time, but I just thank you for bringing this up. It's just filled me with all of the generosity I've received. And I noticed that it's mostly from people who are poor and in Latin America who give boundlessly.
Well, okay, I'm gonna give you your homework assignment, which I now will have to send out an email for the folks who had to leave early. Over the course of the day, find 3 opportunities to do mindful experiments in generosity that do not involve money or material goods. The 3 opportunities. And I sent you something last night that's a handout, that's sort of a little how-to. Think about this, you don't have to do it that way, but it's a little bit of a structure if you're interested in that.